And welcome, welcome, welcome. It's Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO at Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Linda Cohen. She's also known as the Kindness Catalyst. She's been a nationally recognized kindness expert and professional speaker for over a decade. She worked with a variety of businesses and trade associations on the ROI of kindness. Her first book was called The 1,000 Mitzvahs, How Small Acts of Kindness Can Heal, Inspire, and Change Your Life. And her latest book, which came out just a couple of months ago, is called The Economy of Kindness, How Kindness Transforms Your Bottom Line. So she's a past president of National Speakers Association Oregon chapter. And let's see what else. She lives with her husband of 28 years. They have two spirited young adult children and two Cavalier King Charles Spaniels, Ginger and Remy. So we always got to give shout out to the puppies. So welcome, Linda. How are you?
Thank you so much, Peter. I realize in my introduction, I have the name of my dogs and not the name of my children.
Oh. Yeah. Well, you say adult children, but the dogs,
exactly.
When and if they move out, then they will be, note to self.
Exactly.
There goes Mother's Day gifts this year. There goes the Mother's Day gifts this year. All right. Exactly. So if I were to have met you several years ago when you were at American Jewish University or at Brandeis and said, tell me where you're going to be in, 25, 30 years, this probably would have been exactly how you had planned it. Is my not guess?
No, I went to school for fundraising. I really thought I'd be working probably in a Jewish nonprofit doing fundraising. That was kind of what I trained for. And we moved to Portland. It's a very lovely community here, but it's very small. And I never kind of found that particular work here. So stay-at-home mom for about a decade and then started my consulting business, kind of fell into it. You mentioned my first book, and that was a project I took on to honor my father, to do acts of kindness in his memory. And that really led me to this, career that I'm now doing now as a professional speaker.
Yeah, so let's talk about two things, sort of the economy of kindness as a concept, and then we'll get into the business side of speaking, but that's kind of a different concept, right? So we've gone through, thought leadership always comes in waves. There's, the happiness cycle and then the gratitude cycle and grit, resilience, whatever. But I don't know that kindness ever got its day. So
I think it's getting its day now. I mean, honestly, When I started talking about this 10 years ago, people would say, who is going to pay you to talk about kindness? Like, really, they were testing me about that. And I have to say that now many of my speaker colleagues have added this idea of speaking about kindness because it really does relate to the soft skills that I think businesses often say aren't as necessary. When we realize now, if you come in with those soft skills, we can teach you other technical skills that you might need for our culture. I mean, some technical skills.
So is kindness more of a mindset, a culture, a capability that can be developed, all of the above? Like where would you put it?
I think it is developable. I mean, I think we all have it inherently. I think when we get busy and tired and stressed out, we think we don't have the ability to do it anymore. And that's one of the things I challenge audiences when I talk to them, because I don't think it takes a lot to do an act of kindness that could be beneficial and meaningful to someone else. And I do believe it's part of a culture for sure. And I think if you are not paying attention to that, your culture may develop without it. But if you are cognizant of it, you are probably really structuring your work and you're giving a lot of autonomy to your employees to be able to have the kindness gift, that they would share. And just point in case, or case in point, I guess, there was a grocery store that opened up when I was pregnant with my second child back 20 years ago. It was not the cheapest grocery store in town. It was about a mile from my house. Loved shopping there. And part of why I loved shopping there was because the employees, even the checkout clerks, were totally empowered. If they had to make a decision on the fly, they could do this, act of kindness for a customer without having to talk to their managers. And really, that was the culture that the founder really wanted to impart in them, to really give them a lot of autonomy. And I loved shopping there. It's now, there are about 20 of those stores now around the Portland metro area. And it was actually sold to a bigger conglomerate. So the growth is possible when you create a culture where you're really doing that as part of your DNA.
Well, and that empowerment and agency is a big piece, right? Because not that someone would be unkind if every time they have to do something, it's let me check with the manager, which we see a lot in large scale, operations, but it probably isn't an accelerant to kindness.
It isn't.
When you feel like you're sort of an automaton or something like that.
I think giving your employees, and I mean, I've seen it a lot even during this pandemic. I have seen and heard from employees and from clients that one of the biggest ways their manager or their leadership team showed kindness to the employees was allowing them to think outside of the box. I mean, certainly last year when we were all walking into this global pandemic and knew not what it was going to do for our businesses, being allowed to think outside of the box and my manager saying, okay, go for it. Try that. Let's see how it goes. And many times it was successful. And it was something we never would have tried unless we were forced to do it. But it meant a lot to employees. And I mean, I even heard from employees who thought their jobs could have been cut. And instead, the manager was letting me try something different outside of the box that really empowered me. And for that, they were grateful.
Well, it's interesting. I think some things that might have been perceived as, wow, that employer's kind has now become an expectation. So like remote work, oh, I'll cut you some slack because you have a long commute or you've got, whatever, you've got a spouse that works a different shift. So that was perceived as a kindness or an accommodation. Now it's an expectation because we've shown that where we are doesn't necessarily impact how much we do or how productive we are.
100%. I'm actually really happy about that, to tell you the truth, because I think flexibility was always something that was sort of a choice if I could be that way for my employees. And this pandemic has shown that we can have flexibility. We can be doing our jobs remotely and in other places, other hours, and we can still get our jobs done. And I think that I really feel like that's going to be the big demand of employees now as we, walk out of this pandemic. And, the global resignation, I think, has a lot to do with, is my company allowing me to have any kind of work-life balance? And if it is, then it's a company I want to stay working for,
So let's go to sort of the other side here, which might be a bit less kind. So, the pandemic has not been kind to the keynote business. Let's, sort of hashtag understatement, right? But, and I was on a call earlier today on this, how has it evolved for you, right? So the traditional model of you're the speaker, you've got a theme, it lines up with our event or the theme this year or whatever, fly in, do your thing, go home, make everybody happy, great. Mm-hmm. That's not the game that we're playing now. I don't know if we'll ever have another 2019 from an event business perspective. So what are you seeing on your end? And more importantly, how have you, I hate the pivot word, but for lack of a better word, have you pivoted or modified what you do to deliver the message?
I mean, just like every other speaker, March of 2020, things started canceling that were live in person. And then luckily got rescheduled for many of those events in a virtual format. So set up a home studio, began to get more comfortable with technology since I wasn't going to have anybody in IT helping me do any of that. Stepped out of my comfort zone and learned how to do more engaging kind of interactives online so that even though I'm talking to a camera, I am engaging with my audience. And for me, I say beyond the chat. I've tried to step into interactive exercises where people are using their phone, or I'm using an old school whiteboard. I have an old school whiteboard that I have here that I use, or showing things to the camera, anything that engages people, getting people up in their offices and doing something different, or even finding something in their office to show if we're able to show each other. So, I think it honestly, where I was in my own speaking business, I feel sort of blessed that it happened now because I felt kind of nimble enough to be able to try some different things. And I wasn't so stuck in my ways, maybe to be scared of it, and so I feel like I've embraced it. I did my first live. I've had about 4 live events since the summer, but I flew last week for my first live event. And, that actually felt kind of awkward. I wasn't ready to be back. Like, it felt weird to be in front of humans again and see them. It was wonderful. The energy is always amazing. Sure. It's so great to see people.
Well, there's this pent-up need of connection of, I think there's an awkwardness of, do we shake hands? Do we hug? Like all that, the physicality. But
you want to hear a kindness. Yeah. You want to hear a kindness this association did. And I'll mention this in case any of your listeners are association members. They had the little tags, the typical tags you put on board member, whatever. This one said 6 feet apart, please, and vaccinated as a couple of choices of the tags. And I thought that was a way to put, on your name tag, I'm comfortable with this or I'm not. And I thought that was kind of a kindness that the association did.
No, that's interesting because there are, rules, laws that we have to comply to, but then, there's personal choice and everybody's got their thing, whether you want to promote, whether you're vaxxed or whether you're not or whatever, but 6 feet apart isn't to say, oh, okay, I like that person probably doesn't have to be as tense going through that, given that there's a notification that says, okay, that's cool. No judgment, all good, like whatever. And then there's another one that says I'm a hugger or whatever.
I didn't see that one. I didn't see that one at this association, but I actually have a speaker colleague, and he wrote, he did a t-shirt. I think it said something like, "I'm vaccinated, please give me a hug." This was right when last spring when he got vaccinated. He was so excited. So,
Right.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts.
So have you found, so obviously you're doing less in person, but I think, and this is the point for most speakers, just because we're not in person, and in person will come back to some level, et cetera, doesn't mean you're out of the game, right? Because now you have to figure out what is a different medium, obviously digital, to deliver the message, but you've got to sort of develop new muscles and new capabilities, because it's interesting to me in that professional speakers are awesome at the command of the stage, the orchestration of the music, the vibe, the feeling, the, what they're wearing. I mean, all those things play in, right? The slides and all that sort of stuff. And now it's sort of, we're competing with the ding of someone's email or ESPN or whatever opening on another browser. And a lot of the bigness that you need to do from a sort of presentation perspective on stage is not only overkill, but like, whoa, it actually goes the other way, right? It's like a bad infomercial.
So maybe you look to just connect with another human being. Maybe your stories are softer and quieter. And I know for me, I did a virtual keynote with hospice professionals a couple of weeks ago. And when I tell my story, I got a little teary because I have death in my story, in my origin story. And I just felt that emotion. And actually the meeting planner at the end, she said, we can really still connect with you, Linda, even though we're all just virtual. And I think that that's what you're going for when you're more in a virtual setting. I think there's an authenticity that has come out of being virtual. You see people's backgrounds, you see their cat or their dog walking by. Maybe the kid comes up and hugs the person. I mean, if you're the keynote speaker, maybe you're going to try to limit those things from happening, but it still might happen. Sure. And so you're going to be an authentic person experiencing something right now in real time that's happening for you. So I think that
even though there's, more distance, technically, it feels like there's less distance, right? Because depending where I am in the audience, I might have a good view of you, not a great view, whatever, depending on the seat, but everybody's got a great seat. I think there's sort of two waves of reaction that I'm hearing from my speaker friends. One is, oh man, I need that energy of the audience in real time to feed me. I need to know that I've got them, right? And then there's another group that says, I know I'm good and I've got them. And this allows me to just concentrate on the camera and be really good at delivering the message and not letting it get in my head when I see that tiny little blue light way back in row 18 because someone's got their phone out, and I'm ignoring that 492 people are enjoying it and there's one jerk with their phone out. All I'm thinking is, oh, they're, the brain starts going, oh my God, they're getting bored, they're this, they're that, whatever, and it can throw you off your game. So any reactions to that?
I kind of straddle both. I agree 100% with what you're saying, that when you have an audience that isn't 100% filling the energy with you, it can feel off-putting. And there's still this amazing synergy that happens live when I can popcorn around a conversation and have people answer and I can see them and hand them the microphone. But I've also embraced this virtual life. And I think that there is an intimacy that we can create here. And I think that there's a nice work-life balance when you are working remotely and you can, finish your keynote and hop upstairs and, have a meal with a spouse or whatever. I will say one of the things that I have asked for when I'm working virtually is to have a follow-up call with the meeting planner sometime later that day, if at all possible, because as a speaker, the thing I miss is that few minutes afterwards, or maybe even longer if, there isn't another activity happening for the participants right away, that connecting with the human being. And so I have really asked for that.
Well, you also know as the speaker, whether you nailed it or not based on the room, right? Sure. And sometimes you don't, when you think it's sort of, but it's still right. You don't get that on the digital side.
Right.
So I like that idea.
You turn it off, you're at the end of the event, you turn it off and you walk away and you have no feedback whatsoever. I mean, maybe people are putting in the comments, thank you, that really resonated, whatever, maybe.
Yeah.
But I've made it a point not only to try to make an appointment with the meeting planner, if at all possible, soon after the event to just get a little live feedback. I also try to do some LinkedIn right away with my audience. If I've had people, I have a slide that says I'm on LinkedIn, please LinkedIn to me.
Yeah.
I have a way to engage them, and I'll give something to them, a PDF about 18 ways to cultivate kindness or what have you. And then I'll follow up with those people so that I have some live virtual interaction with people who I know were participating.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Any other thoughts as in terms of moving forward, in terms of other ways to deliver the kindness message? So keynoting is obvious, right? And whether that's done in person or remotely, but have you put thought into programs, e-learning? How do you go into an organization and if an organization says to you, yeah, help us get our people to be kinder, whether to each other, to our customers, to the market, whatever it is. And you've done any work in that area?
Well, I just wrote my second book, like you mentioned, and that just came out October 1st. So I am using that content to begin to create more deep dive kindness workshops that I am offering to businesses where we could do, several days together. Probably I'm going to structure it a 4-day over the course of 6 or 8 months, where I would come in and do some segments for them and homework in between. So I have a couple of first clients that we'll be talking about that with. But I'm excited to be able to do a deeper dive into more long-term cultural work. And probably that's a pivot for me because, keynoting was my sole work mostly. Right. But I think that this is an important way. And I think companies are going to need it as we weather the pandemic and come out of it.
Well, I think that chunking out the content over time is where it's going, right? So it used to be we had this because everything was in person. So if we flew everybody into wherever, the hotel and wherever X for a day, we had to make the most of it. Now, if we can do it remote, it's great to do an hour or two worth of content, give them some things to do, reconvene in 6 or 8 weeks and say, how did you apply that? What did you do with that? How did, put them into cohorts or whatever. And then by the time the program is over, not the session, it's over a period of time, they've actually developed their own kindness habits or ways or tested things. Maybe some work, some didn't, whatever, but they've had an opportunity.
You could give them content, have them exercise it for the few weeks in between or month in between or whatever the timeline is. Come back if there's any questions or things that aren't working. Or one of my favorite questions that I have come up with during this pandemic is what holds you back from finding ways to be kind? And I started asking that last November 2020 to a group of firefighters when I was told this is not a group that's going to engage with you. So you got to find some way to engage with them. And so I used an interactive technique and it was so successful that I started using it with every audience. And there's some great information in there, because if people say stressed, tired, overwhelmed, but they say management, don't get good onboarding, whatever, that's a big aha for and it's anonymous. So it's safe for the employees to share that, but that can be really important information for the leadership. And that's the only way you're going to know how to change a culture, So it's important to kind of know what's going on. And I keep saying, if we're having this great resignation and you think you have an awesome company with an awesome culture, you better start talking to your employees before they quit. You maybe want to have those interviews now with them. What's holding
before
you back?
They quit and before they broadcast to, Glassdoor or whatever, how maybe less than kind it really is behind the scenes. So this has been fun. Any final thoughts or words of wisdom from the Queen of Kindness?
It doesn't have to cost a lot. The ROI of kindness could be not very expensive. So if you think it's going to cost a lot, and in terms of your bottom line or for any organization, it is absolutely going to save you dollars with turnover, with your reputation of your organization, where you potentially could lose clients, and being able to just have a wonderful culture where people really love working for you and love coming and being part of that. So
thanks. This has been great. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much, Linda.
Thanks, Peter.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.